Chapter 97. The Lamp. Had you descended from the Pequod's try-works to the Pequod's forecastle, where the off-duty watch were sleeping, for one single moment you would have almost thought you were standing in some illuminated shrine of canonized kings and counselors. There they lay in their triangular oaken vaults, each mariner a chiseled muteness, a score of lamps flashing upon his hooded eyes. And merchantmen, oil for the sailor is more scarce than the milk of queens. To dress in the dark and eat in the dark and stumble in darkness to his palate, this is his usual lot. But whaleman, as he seeks the food of light, so he lives in light. He makes his berth in Aladdin's lamp and lays him down in it, so that in the pitchiest night of the ship's black hull still houses an illumination. See what with entire freedom the whaleman takes his handful of lamps, often but old bottles and vials, though, to the copper cooler of the try-works, and replenishes them there as mugs of ale at a vat. He burns too the purest of oil in its unmanufactured and therefore unvitiated state, a fluid unknown to solar, lunar, or astral contrivances ashore. It is sweet as early grass butter in April. He goes and hunts for his oil as to be sure of its freshness and genuineness, even as a traveler on the prairie hunts up his own supper of game. This is the end of chapter 97. Now, that's a really short chapter. And it talks about lamps. And oil lamps, you're used to electric lamps. They sit on the floor, sit on the table, have a light bulb, turn it on, turn it off. Now, oil lamps, the way they work is you have a container and a wick. And the wick is typically a piece of fabric. It can be made up of anything. Cotton is often used. There are some wicks which are made out of like asbestos or something, or a ceramic mesh, something that'll draw up the oil but not actually burn. Though, as I said, cotton wicks are very common. Anything really can be, anything that will you draw up the oil with capillary action will work as a wick. So you have essentially anything can be used as a lamp when you set it up like this. So they have these old bottles. So you could have like this old bottle that had been used for rum, or a bowl, or whatever. A bowl would probably be bad because if the oil sloshes out of the bowl and catches on fire, then you have, burning like a fire, which is not good. But, a bottle. So the classic Molotov cocktail where you have the bottle with the rag soaked in gasoline coming out of the top and lid and burning, which, gets thrown and explodes. But until it gets thrown and explodes, it's actually a lamp. Because, you have the oil or gasoline or whatever being drawn up through the wick, which is... Anyway, so it's a wick. It's a lamp. And anyway, he talks about... Here you have the whalemen. And they say the merchant ships, there are no lights below deck. Once the sun goes out, unless you're the captain, you're in the dark. Or unless you're the captain or the guy steering the ship, you're pretty much in the dark. Because, oil is expensive and we're not going to waste oil or candles or anything like that on just the normal schlubs. But here you have the Pequod, and they have all of this oil. They have as much oil as they want because, once they go out, once they get that first whale, once the try-works are fired up, they have all the oil they want or need. So here they are, and you have these whalemen, and they're just there in the light because they can be. Also, talks about sweetgrass butter in April. Now, this used to be a thing that you would have cows that move from one pasture to another, and cows getting fed different things during different times of the year. So in the spring, they go into the pasture, and it's clover, and it's fresh young grass, and so it's easily digestible, and so the milk is sweet, and it's tasty. And then later on in the year, they eat other things, and they start eating more thistle, and it's not as good. And then over the winter, they start eating silage, and that's kind of fermented, so that kind of carries an off taste a little bit in. But then all of a sudden, springtime, they get out, into the pasture, and then all of a sudden, beautiful milk starts coming out. Now, nowadays, cows' diets are regulated so that the cow is essentially eating the same thing year round. So they eat the same mixture of hay and silage and maybe the occasional little bit of fresh grass, but not nearly as much as it used to be. And there's actually a dairy up in New Hampshire, Vermont, I can't remember which, where they have a field of sunflowers. And they have this huge field of sunflowers. And once a year, when the sunflowers are fully grown, they take the cows and they let them out into the sunflowers. And for the next couple of weeks, the milk and the butter that come from the cows are actually flavored by the sunflowers. And it's like a richer, thicker butter because the sunflowers have a lot of oil in them. So a sunflower is a very oily food relative to everything else. And so that 1 or 2 weeks, the cows have a creamier milk. And that's one of the things that happens that we've kind of lost touch with in modern life because we no longer have this seasonableness of our foods.